Oh no! This is going to shatter your brain. Charlie Easton, what are you going to teach us today?
Well, I'm going to teach people to stop complaining about acrylics, Eric.
Oh man, I complain about acrylics all the time. What's the deal?
Well, I teach a lot of workshops and people keep coming to me and saying drying time on acrylics, all sorts of problems with it. The reality is you can use them to your benefit, and acrylics can create these magnetic effects that you can move people around within a scene and create the painting of your dreams. That's what
you don't need turpentine or mineral spirits, and you can travel the world. All you need is a bottle of water.
There you go.
All right. Well, we'll get right to it. We'll get this started.
It's Art School Live with Eric Rhodes. Now, here's your host, Eric Rhodes.
Stop complaining about acrylics. All right, this is going to be fun. I'm Eric Rhodes. I'm here every day at 12 noon, weekdays since COVID began. So if you want to learn about art, we try to get a lot of new ideas on here so you can really get a feel for it. So we want to show you what Charlie does. Charlie does some incredible work with acrylics, Charlie Easton, and he's up in Vancouver, Washington, and he's got some pretty amazing places to paint like that. And the skies are incredible there too. If you're watching today and you put a comment in the comment section, you have a chance to win today a pair of the amazing see-through color value specs. These really will help train your brain. So make sure to leave a comment, whether it's in replay or live. The winner of our last prize is, I don't know, I'm not finding it. Okay. Martha Tucker Honeycutt in Muleshoe, Texas. Now that's a real Texas name. Hi there, I'm from Muleshoe. All right, I wonder how they got that name. That's pretty weird. Okay, we also have a free video for you. You can stream it instantly, or you can get the DVD if you want to pay for shipping. Yeah, some people still do DVDs. 5 hours of video. It's a sampler of some of our best produced videos, 97 incredible art secrets. Just go to 97artsecrets.com. Now we're going to be back to Charlie Easton. Charlie, welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, you can take it away. Let's learn about acrylics and how to make them work.
Sounds good. And I just one thing, Eric, I hate to be critical. I'm not in Vancouver, Washington. I'm in Vancouver, BC, Canada. So shout out.
Did I say Washington?
Yeah, I'm afraid you did.
I'm so sorry.
I think it must be my accent that's throwing you. I clearly am not Canadian.
No, you talk like you're from Vancouver, Washington. I used to work in Vancouver, Washington. I don't know why I said that. I know the difference.
I'm delighted.
One is incredibly beautiful and big, and one is, well, I'll just say it's different than the one you're in.
Okay, there you go.
And now I'm going to hear in the comments from somebody from Vancouver, Washington. Anyway, Vancouver, BC.
Right on. Well, that's it. That's where I am. And yeah, delighted to be here. And lots of really good acrylic painters up here in Canada that I've learned a ton of. And I teach a lot of workshops, both in oil and in acrylics. And as I alluded to in the intro there, Eric, is so often I get people complaining about the properties of acrylic. And what I think is that I can actually turn those subtleties and nuances actually into real sort of benefits of the medium. Because I think that when you look at the major problems that people talk about in acrylics, it's four things. Firstly, when you apply the paint, it dries a different color. Secondly, you lose texture when it dries. Thirdly, that obviously the drying time is very, very quick. And finally, that you don't get that much coverage with your paint. Now, I mean, clearly they're all linked, and you've got to go back to the basic fundamental structure of the difference between oil paint and acrylic paint to see the difference. So bear with me as I go into a bit of science on this.
Okay. Well, you better put your white lab coat on.
Yeah, that's it. When you buy an oil paint, when you buy a tube of oil paint, in there you have pigment and you have oil, and the oil oxidizes or at least I think that's the property, it hardens and the pigment stays solid. So what you have is a really pure piece of paint, mostly pigment. In acrylic, you have four things. You've got the pigment, you've got binder, you've got plastic, and you've got water. And mostly in a lot of these acrylic paints, you got a lot of water. And when that evaporates, you then still have more in your paint, more sort of gunk, binder in your paint than you do in an oil paint. It's the reason why when you go into an art store, you pick up a tube of oil paint, you pick up a tube of acrylic, you're paying a lot more for your oil paint than you are your acrylic, because you're paying predominantly for the pigment. So you've got those two tubes. I wish that they packaged them differently. I think they shouldn't try and put an acrylic paint into something that looks like an oil paint tube. They should say this is a completely different thing, in the same way that watercolor looks different, in the same way that other mediums look different. Because as soon as you try and make one look like the other, you're going to have problems. The thing about acrylic, when you have that paint that has all of this, you know, binder in it, you get very different effects out of it. You can create a more translucent blend. You also are creating a flatter blend without so much chunk. And then also, because it dries quickly, you have to be very well planned when it comes to your painting. Especially, what's the number one thing that people complain about? It's the edges. The edges of acrylic can often appear far harder than when you're working in oil, because in oil you have the ability to do your painting and then go and smudge some edges to create your soft edges and then leave your hard ones to the end. In acrylic, you have to be better planned. In acrylic, you have to work quicker to get that wet in wet time, because acrylic is it's kind of like a drunk in a bar fight, Eric. Basically,
and have you been one?
Everyone down with it. When it starts to dry, if you're having like if you're really sort of frustrated, go, I need to extend this, I need to extend it. If it starts to dry, just get out of the bar. Let it do its thing and go back in later. So you either work it with acrylic dry or wet. And what I love about acrylic is you have the ability to do both within the same painting session on the same panel very, very quickly. And I'm going to show you a couple of techniques.
I thought, Charlie, that once
blends.
I thought that once you had that acrylic down and it was dried, all you could do is paint over it.
That's right. But you can still create a blend.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to show you a couple of things.
All right.
On that.
Hello, Switzerland. Glad you're watching.
Hello, indeed, Switzerland. Okay. So let's go to this. So what I've just done up here, Eric, is I've got up here some magenta with a little bit of white, and then some cadmium with a little bit of white. And Eric kindly recorded a previous video with me that I believe will be on one of your channels, where I talk a little bit about paint color choices that I use when I go to paint. And these two colors are ones that I use a lot, magenta and cadmium orange. And the reason I do that is they're single pigment colors, and that they create really interesting magnetic blends. So I'm just going to show this to you very quickly, and then we're going to get on and do an actual, like a little demo. But let's take some colors that are on the other side of the spectrum here. So I'm going to take ultramarine blue, which is obviously a cool color compared to the warm color that you've got down here. Now let's just put a little bit of this ultramarine blue and a little bit of white, and just scumble it over the surface. When I say scumble, I'm just putting a very light blend of it over the side of that. And I'll do it on the lighter version here as well. And what you see is that I'm just touching let's go in a bit tighter on that. I'm just touching the surface of these.
Bring the camera. The camera is not, needs to come down a little bit. There you go. Yep.
So here you can still see, because of the unique properties of the acrylic, because it's now dry on dry, and it's also, you know, it's thin in terms of its pigment load. You can actually create a really interesting blend between warm and cool that has both within it. So in oil painting, if you're painting alla prima out in the field, you would create a blend of the blue and the magenta. And I would encourage, it's difficult to show this on camera, you know, we're still constrained a little bit by what we've got here, but if you create this blend in oil paint, it would look more like that, which, as you can see, tends more into gray.
Yeah.
So you're not getting the translucency that you can get in acrylic either. If I show you it like that, which is dry brushed, or you can get it by introducing just a little bit of gloss medium, which is essentially just more of the same binder that you have within the paint as it is. You can do it as a glaze, and both instances, this one is you get less hard edge in there, but you're still seeing what's underneath and what's above it. And exactly the same thing can happen for this, for the orange. So that's the glaze, and you can just put that on. You can use your finger, it will sit within the troughs of the canvas, or you can get it and scumble it over the top. And you're
that way you're getting some of that showing through, which is
and you're
nice.
getting it exactly. You're getting it showing through. So there's, again, if you were to mix your orange and your blue, which really are opposite sides of the spectrum, let's just do that quickly. What you're getting is you're getting a blend that happens at a far more molecular level. All the pigment kind of sort of, it blends at a far smaller level, and you end up getting a gray. So instead of getting something here that looks really, you know, gray and possibly muted, you actually can create a very vibrant blend.
Yeah, more sense of light.
More sense of light. And I like to call this, and when I come down to Denver in May to teach at the Plein Air convention, I'm going to be talking a lot more about this, about magnetic areas of your painting. And you create a blend or a mix like this, you're going to create more attraction for the eye. So you can move people around a scene in a lot more interesting way. You don't necessarily want to have this everywhere. I can tell you right
now, Charlie, that your session is going to be packed.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. We don't want to speak to an empty room, do we?
No, we don't.
So that's just super quick. What I would encourage anyone that is wanting to go and paint with acrylics, especially anyone that wants to go and paint with acrylics outside, is get comfortable with them first in the studio. So do little tests like this. See how paint reacts when it's dry or when it's wet. Try different blending techniques. And obviously know that when you're outside, especially if it's a warm day, especially if it's semi-arid, you're going to have more evaporation. And so that you are naturally going to have a quicker drying time on some of these things. But
so really, this is what you've described is really kind of like if you were to do an underpainting in an oil and then glaze over it. It's not the same as the scumbling over, but you could get that similar effect. But most of us are painting alla prima, just kind of blending the color and then laying it down.
Right. Yeah, it's exactly right. You're often in your oil painting, yeah, it's coming from the underside. This, you can create these effects in acrylic within, you know, if you're outside in sunny day, you can create it within 4 or 5 minutes. Yeah. And the problem arises is when you want to have that kind of blend, or when you want to have that kind of muted nature, and then you have to be planned on where you are going to do your wet in wet blending. And that's what I'm talk a little bit now.
All right.
So what I want to do, I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay. You'll see here, I have a reference. This is a beautiful beach near Tofino on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And as you can see from this image, we've got if you're looking at this and saying it's a beach, well, yeah, that's one way of looking at it. If you look at it and say it's a bunch of abstract shapes that have color and edge, then it's a pretty interesting, varied kind of scene. And you can find this image if you go to charlieeaston.com/reference. You'll see I've posted this up on my website, and you'll be able to take a closer look at this image. But you can see down here, you've got some pretty interesting blends that are going on down in the foreground from the dry sand into the wet sand. You've got some pretty interesting blends that are going on within the wet sand here. You've got some interesting marks that come across the front here that kind of sit on top of those wet blends. And also within the background here, you've got some, you got some areas where over the form you get light that moves down, then you got shadow, then the light moves over the top again. And you've got other interesting shapes going on within the rock pattern there. You also have in the sky a very soft way that the sky is blooming. So if I'm going to try and boil this down to something very simple, where I see a very soft blend, I'm going to want to try and do it wet in wet. And then when I have an area where you have, like this, the little areas of sea foam moving over the top of a wet blend, I'm going to try and do that in dry brush. So if I'm looking at this, I should say, everyone probably who you've had on to talk has probably talked about painting in shapes. And it's so important. It was the biggest development in my art, was working out shapes. And it's also really important for acrylic painters to work in shape, because as soon as you work in line, you have a whole bunch of very short staccato lines that become independent elements within the scene. If you say, actually, I'm going to work in one big shape like this that might have a gradation to it, then you can paint that quickly wet in wet, and therefore you use the properties of the acrylic. Similarly, there's another large shape here on the left that is really, all is happening is it's going from dark and cool to light and warm. And it is one gradation within a shape. And it always amazes me, Eric, how much, if you abstract the environment into these kind of shapes, you look back to where we were on the, where am I? On the original image, if you just work in simple shapes, they come back together to form, a painting that has form. So that's just a quick identification of the way that I would look at this scene and go, here's a bunch of shapes. Now let's get at it quickly.
So here's somebody in Sao Paulo, Brazil saying, finally, acrylic, finally.
Yeah, I've seen you've had some good acrylic painters on with you, and everyone brings their own way of doing things. So
yeah, but
I
you do
enjoy
it right.
checking out the videos on your channel, Eric.
Absolutely, we need more.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about the paint and how it's different. I've talked about different blends and how you can create interesting blends where you get the translucency of acrylic to create interest. And I've talked a little bit now about why it's important in acrylic to paint in shape, because then you can paint fast. That is the real crux of it when it comes to the handling of the paint, is that you do when you're painting wet in wet, you've got to maximize that fluidity. Now,
especially
here's another
if you're
way of
standing in 80-degree sunshine.
Yeah, well, I got to get an umbrella out, and you've also got to get your spray bottle out. You can paint on a wet surface or at least a damp surface. You can keep it damp if you have one of these that puts out a nice fine mist, and you can also keep the paint wet. Now, talking about paint and talking about painting fast in acrylic, one of the big problems that I see people, one of the reasons I think people complain a lot in these workshops that I'm talking about, Eric, is that they get their palette and they bring it out and they squeeze a little bit of whatever it might be, cadmium red that they paid a lot for in this store, and they think, oh, I'm going to use exactly that amount. And the trouble with that is when you squeeze onto a flat surface, you create a little ball. Now that little ball of paint has got a very high surface area to volume ratio. Does that make sense? You've got a lot of surface area and not a lot of mass.
Yeah.
What that means is you have a lot of area where the paint can evaporate. Sorry, the water can evaporate, and so the paint dries.
Yeah.
What I do, Eric, is I use these big trays. They could be fishing tackle boxes. I just got this from the dollar store. They're deep, and I have lots of paint already squeezed out or, you know, scooped out from large jars, and they will be in these large trays, you know, that you just have a little lid for, or sometimes they pivot like that. And I can keep the surface of this wet through spraying it with a spray paint, a spray bottle. And this has a far smaller surface area to volume ratio, so it doesn't evaporate so quickly.
How long will the paint last in that container? It looks like it would stay weeks.
Weeks, absolutely weeks. Now, it does, obviously, you've got to be mindful of the fact that it might skin over on the top, so you got to keep it, you got to be on it. But yeah, I will just keep replenishing, just keep putting more stuff in and more stuff in, and one of these boxes just never dries out for me, especially when you paint with it a lot.
Right.
Now, when you're painting like this, the other massive benefit is that you're using more paint. You know, I think so often you squeeze a little bit and you go, well, that's all I've got. That's my limit. That's all I'm prepared to put down, and I'm going to use it. And then the flip side of that is if it's left on your palette at the end, you go, oh, well, I can't leave this cadmium red. I'm going to have to use it. It costs lots of money. So you keep going at it, and you end up putting red in an area that you don't want it to be.
Yeah, we're always too chintzy with our paint. We need to get more paint out. That's a typical problem everybody tells me with their students, that they don't put enough paint out.
Absolutely. And in this, and when you paint like this, you don't necessarily have to put it out because it's already out for you. It's all ready to go.
You're just dipping into that. You're not putting it out. You're not taking a palette knife and then putting it out again.
That's right. And as you can see here on the blue, you can see that it's got a little bit mucky on the edge here because I try and pick from the edge. And then, you know, I just mindful of that skin surface. If there's an area that I'm doing where I know that I need to have something, you know, that's a little bit muted, I need the blue to be muted, I'll just pull off whatever crud I have on the side and I'll work that into the paint for that area that's a bit more muted and leave areas of purity so I can pull from that when I need it.
Terrific.
Now, the good thing about having more paint in acrylic, as I've already mentioned, is that there's less pigment per, you know, cubic, whatever you want it to be, than there is in oil paint. And so if you want to get that pigment load onto the canvas, you've got to use lots of paint. Right. If you want to create the texture on the canvas, which has got a little bit more of a draw for the eye, you've got to use more paint. And especially if you're using a cheap canvas with not a lot of paint, then that dictates the way that your painting is going to look. You'll see people like got these washes of acrylic on a really, you know, poor quality canvas that might have ribs in it. Well, all you're going to see is the ribs and the canvas, and that starts to dictate the way that the painting is going to end up looking. I mean, if you look at like some of these paintings behind me, they've got tons of paint on it right from the get-go, and because of the way that the paint can dry quickly with this with the acrylic, is that you actually can still work over it very quickly. Even though you put loads on, you don't have to wait a week for it to dry. So how much time have I got left, Eric?
Yeah, all the time you need.
Oh, right on. Okay, so what we're now going to do, you've seen the reference, you've seen what I'm going to try and paint, and I'm just going to do what I might do in the field if I was in, let's say, this spot. Let's say the tide was coming in when I'm here. I'm just going to change the camera so you can see that.
Now, why don't you zoom in on that a little bit?
Just punch in a bit.
Yeah.
Is that good? You can see the whole full frame?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can see the reference that I've got there down in the corner. If I was standing in this spot and the tide was coming in, well, then I probably haven't got very long to get something down. So I need to paint quickly. And for all of you who are kind of somewhat new to this, you might want to try and identify the shapes well in advance and almost do a thumbnail. You could absolutely do a thumbnail and say, what are the shapes and what value do they have? All sorts of good stuff that you can do in terms of your sketchbook. I've kind of showed it to you already on the little screen share that I just did with you there, showing the different shapes that I'm going to try and create in here. But I do that intuitively now because I learned it. I've done it enough, and now it becomes part of my process.
Leslie is asking, why the orange background?
Great question. Great question. The reason that I'm painting on orange is I often paint on a toned panel in acrylic because acrylic is more translucent, as I've described. You then get a uniformity coming through everything, and so it holds everything together neatly. Now you could do this with any color, you could do it with any value, and you could do it with any temperature. And I choose to use a warmer one, especially for a scene like this. It's a warm day. I don't always paint on orange. I mix it up. But this is what I'm going to be painting on today.
Well, if you look at your reference photo, you look up in the clouds, there's orange in that white. You look into the sand, some of the light coming through is kind of an orange feel.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of already in there. And then because of the nature of the paint, there is the translucency that you're gonna see it through the paint, even if it might be at a very, very low level. I don't typically leave areas of this orange available to be seen, but it does form a bit of a unity. Now, the trouble with demoing on it is that until I've covered the panel, you're going to see this orange because it's very bright, and it might distort the way that you see this scene. Right. But let's just get into this quickly. Sorry, Eric.
I said let's.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm going to do a super fast demo here, just in the same way that I might paint this if I was out on site about to get wet. So I'm going to start with my background, and I'm going to try and get this all wet in wet. So what I've done is I'm just spraying with a little dollar store bottle the canvas so that it's got some moisture on it. And I'm also now just going to start working and putting in the whole of the background wet in wet.
So that looks like about an 8x10 or a 9x12?
12x16.
Okay.
Yeah. This is a 12x16. I typically work bigger in acrylic than I do in oil. In oil, I tend to be a bit more, I don't know, a little bit less dramatic in my brush marks. So I'm just putting in here that shadow that came up, and then as I said before, I can now work into that with some more color in here, and I'm going wet in wet. You see the blend that is being made is not going to draw your eye. If you're looking at the scene, that image there, I want your eye to go into this kind of area around here where the waves are meeting the land. And there's this sort of beautiful kind of motion as the water comes up and hits the land there. And you've got that surf and you've got all of that interest. So I'm just throwing in some colors here that are kind of indicating the background, showing that there's a bit of form there, but they're all wet in wet blends that are going to draw the eye less than a harder edge blend that you get when you're scumbling over the top of the surface, or that you're kind of glazing over the top of an existing color.
Carolyn is asking, did you spray with just plain tap water?
Just plain tap water.
I thought you'd be using Perrier or something.
Only in France.
Yeah, let's go painting in France. That sounds fun.
Sounds like a great idea. Okay, so it might be as simple as that. If I'm painting outside, I'm going to be really, really specific as to what I'm trying to get. And I'm trying to get an understanding of when the water is meeting the land, and then the reflections that are created in front. So now let's stick in just our sky, because I want that as a wet in wet blend as well.
So do you need to re-wet your canvas because this much time has passed?
Now, there's still a little bit of wetness on there. Outside, I would. But I think here we're going to be all right. Plus, also, because I'm painting on this surface, another reason to put a ground down for your acrylic is that if you're putting your ground down, this is it's acrylic gloss medium plus the tint of the pigment. And that seals the surface of the canvas, and it makes this very plasticky and very slippery. So what it does is it allows the water to stay on there a little bit longer, and it also means that anything that I put down it will create a slightly softer edge. If you're just on the canvas itself, the canvas can absorb the paint more, and it will create a harder edge. Now, this little landmass that you can see in the bottom right side is such, when you're looking down here, that landmass becomes so soft. And so that has to be painted wet in wet. So lots of paint, nice, soft edges to it. Tendency that I also see, Eric, and you'll see here that I've just basically created a shape here for this tree that's sticking out. Often what will happen is people will paint this landmass, everything dries, and then they go, oh, now we need to paint that tree. And they'll go, oh, I'm looking at that tree. It's really dark in the shadow, and they'll paint it. And that thing will just stick out like a sore thumb.
Right.
And it will, especially in acrylic, hard edge on hard edge. It's not like when you put it in oil and you can actually say, you know, I'm just going to put this into a wet area. In acrylic, it will stand out so much. So you've got to know that you're going to create these effects hard edge when you're going
well, and you're not trying to draw attention to that as your focal point.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So let's stick in just so that we get a little bit of keying the painting. So by keying the painting, I mean getting in your lights and your darks so you understand what the value range is. So here's going to be my surf. This is basically white with just a tiny amount of yellow in it, and then because it's acrylic and it's somewhat translucent, you've got the orange underpainting coming through as well. So it's a nice warm white, and then we're going to get in some of these larger masses below it that, as I said, we're going to be creating wet in wet, painting it fast, understanding that we've got warmer and cooler and darker, lighter and warmer, one shape, one area. Then in the reflection of the green, we're going to be cooler and lighter, darker and warmer as it goes up. And then on the right-hand side, it's going to be like a more of a purple blue down here going to a lighter, cooler blue higher up. So we've essentially got three channels here of wet in wet blend that are going to blend this direction and then also left to right. And once you've identified that that is what you're going to do, just go ahead and do it and see how it ends up. That little recognition that I've just made saying this is what I'm going to try and achieve is often enough. That's why you go out painting, is to get these little recognitions of place. And sometimes that's doing a painting. You might not actually be doing exactly the right thing on your canvas, but you've made the recognition. And so that's what stays with you. Okay, so we've got a pretty dark, cool lower down. And I'm going to take another brush and create a light warm at the top. Now, you're probably fairly tough to see it against that, the orange background. as it comes down, it's getting a little bit darker, a little bit cooler. And this is all wet in wet blend. Okay, now let's be quick on this. Let's create the next one next door to it, which is got that greeny blue, cool green at the bottom. And then it's warmer and darker at the top. Up to here, where the shape starts to move across.
If you guys are just tuning in, our guest today is Charlie Easton in Vancouver, British Columbia. And he's telling you not to be fearful of acrylic, that all these rumors you've heard about what you can't do with acrylic are just not true. So
That's right.
if you're just joining us, you'll have to watch replay later so you can catch up.
That's it. Well, you see, it's earlier here in BC, Eric. It's, everyone's just having their morning coffee and just going, what am I going to do in the studio today?
Yep.
Okay, so I've now got two areas. They still have a little bit of fluidity left to them, so that if I did want to use my finger, I can blend between the two to create that soft blend. In probably a couple of minutes time, almost now we're going to have the drunk is going to come out and start taking down all the, if I started putting paint on the top of it, then the drunk bar fighter of the acrylic below is going to start to really dry very quickly, and it's going to take all the fluidity out of the layer you're putting down on top. So if you've got drying paint underneath and you put your paint on the top of it, it will dry even quicker than it normally would.
All right.
So this now, I'm not going to mess around with that edge anymore. I've still got some fluidity on that right side, so that when I then put in my my blend on the right here, we're going to have a bit of fluidity in there. So I'm not going to re-up the water on the canvas, but I'm going to be using lots of paint. And as I said, it goes down into this sort of red-blue, lower down, maybe even darker than that, as you're looking through the translucent water below.
Nothing like purple and green together.
Yeah, there you go. Especially with a bit of orange in it. A lot of people make their greens far too blue.
Yeah. Gotta warm them up.
That's it. And now you can start to see I've got these hits of orange around here that are really drawing your eye, and I don't want that. Sometimes you might leave an area which will hit the way you want it to, and you go, oh, okay, well, let's leave that piece of underpainting. But in this instance, that's not exactly what I want. So I'm just just taking out those areas. There are some darks on the underside of that shape here, which is the rocks behind the surf. So let's get that in. That's gone too dark here. And if let's say there's an area that I want to go back into, let's say I've now got to this point in the painting and go, well, this background needs to have more work in it, or at least I've got a particular color wrong. Like maybe I've got that color wrong. Then I need to go and paint more areas than you might want to. This is certainly one of the challenges. If you want to have another wet and wet blend up here, you're now got to have to say, I'm going to repaint a decent chunk of this area. because you can't really create a wet and wet blend on something that is pre-existing. You can say, I'm going to go over it with a glaze, and as I demonstrated with the little technique that I showed earlier, that can create a soft blend, but it's gonna be tricky to handle. So let's just do one last thing here, and we'll leave it at that. So here we've got nice wet and wet blends, and then we've got a little bit of wet and wet going across. It's a little bit of a harder edge because I've scumbled a little bit of it. But let's get a bit of this nice sea foam that is on the top, and let's just scumble that across the top of the water, which is, as I said, going to show you how you can create different blends in acrylic, dry brushed, very, very quickly. Because now all of this is pretty much dry, and certainly out in the field it would be. So we've got to have that little hit. I might even put another wave behind there sort of to demarcate where the water is coming and hitting the landmass. And let's get some nice thick paint. We're just going to pull this down now, unifying these three shapes, connecting the three.
Pay close attention to how Charlie's holding his brush.
Yeah, holding it very lightly for something like this.
From the back. That way he doesn't have too much control.
Yeah,
Hello,
exactly.
Tokyo.
I'm handing over control to the muse.
They have no control. We're not going to give them any control.
And so here we're unifying these shapes by pulling something across them. And this edge up here is still too magnetic. It's too, you got the orange in there in the sky. So I'm not going to do it now on this demo, but I think what I would do at this point is I like the way that these blends are working down below. Up here, I would probably repaint the whole of this top section, which is a bit of a pain in the whatnot if you think you've done some brilliant painting in one area of it.
Yeah.
But if you've done it once, you can do it again.
Absolutely. Ken Grody is asking, do you dilute your paints down as much as watercolors? I think you answered that by saying no, you just paint direct.
I paint direct, and I just use more paint. Yeah.
Hello, Norway. Welcome. Man, you're pulling them in today.
Well, let's hope we got some of these people coming to join us down in Denver.
Yeah, well, I need to come to the Plein Air convention. What you're going to be teaching there?
Yeah.
That's going to be exciting. You're going to have a packed room.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Yeah, let me play something really quickly about the Plein Air convention for those people who don't need it. Then we'll come back and we'll finish up quickly.
Sounds good.
We're going to run out of time here quickly. Here we go.
There's only one place in the world where the entire family of Plein Air gathers. Get ready for the Woodstock of Plein Air painting. Come home to the 10th Annual Plein Air Convention and Expo, May 21st through 25th in Colorado. Because it's our 10th birthday bash, show up and we'll bring the gifts and the cake. This year's event promises to be the biggest and most exciting yet, with a jam-packed schedule of demonstrations and workshops on 5 different stages, including a stage for oil, watercolor, pastel, and extra demos, all included for one price. And a giant expo hall of the latest art materials at deep discounts, and the only place in the world to find all the Plein Air specific materials in one place. Plus, a faculty and attendee art show and daily paintouts with over 1,000 of your closest friends. 5 days focused on the Plein Air lifestyle and a few surprises. You'll have the opportunity to learn from the best of the best, meet them, and even buy them a drink. We've spared no expense to bring the finest Plein Air painters alive today, including Lori Putnam, Alvaro Castanet, Steve Curry, Don Demers, Michelle Dunaway, Albert Handel, Jane Hunt, Daniel Sprick, Camille Preswanik, Jim Woodark, and a total of 80 top instructors. And when we go outside, they'll be there to help you. And if you're new to plein air painting, we have a special Essentials Day just for you. We'll walk you through how to paint in every medium, what you need to start painting outdoors, and our special faculty will work directly with you when you paint outdoors together. It's a powerful way to learn, and you won't be alone, even if you come not knowing anyone. Plus, if you're new and never been before, our orientation puts people together, so you never have to be alone. Join us as we celebrate our 10th anniversary with celebrity guest Jane Seymour. VIP ticket holders will not only receive upfront seating and access to a special VIP lounge, you'll also enjoy a meet and greet with her, plus a chance to get their picture taken with this multiple Emmy and Golden Globe winner, who has a genuine love of art. How cool is that? So if you're serious about improving your skills as an artist, reconnecting with old friends or making new ones, and then having the time of your life while making memories that will last a lifetime, the 10th Annual Plein Air Convention and Expo is the event for you. Don't wait. Register today and experience the ultimate in plein air instruction in colorful Colorado. Grab your ticket today before we're sold out at pleinairconvention.com.
So, Charlie, you're going to drive down from Vancouver, British Columbia to Denver.
Yeah.
This is the last time we're ever going to be in Denver.
Oh, okay.
And so if somebody's like, well, I'll go next time, we're that close. Like if you're in driving distance, just do it. Just do it, because we're not going to be back even close to that region for a long, long time. So anyway, Charlie, show us what you've got here, and then we're going to wrap it up. We lost him. There we are.
I'm back.
Okay. All right. Okay. Wow. That's
Yeah.
really
So I'm going to be driving down, and I'm going to be posting, paintings that I'm doing as I go down. Obviously, passing some beautiful places, and so I'll be plein air painting as I go. So yeah, follow my Instagram, and there'll be plenty that will be. That we posted our tips and techniques, and obviously some places that you'll know better than I do.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you there and meeting you in person.
Absolutely.
And thank you for doing this today.
No problem. It's a pleasure
All right.
to be here.
We learned a lot. Yeah, any final thoughts about acrylic?
Just get comfortable with them, and the more you do it, it's like anything. The more you do it, the better you'll get. And don't think of them as oil. Think of them as their own unique thing, and you're going to get a ton out of them.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, Charlie, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Our guest today is Charlie Easton, and you're going to see him at the Plein Air Convention live and in person, along with 80 other instructors. We're going to go out painting every day, world's largest paint out, and instructors in the mornings all day. It's really going to be a terrific show. We will see you there. We'll see you tomorrow right here at 12 noon Eastern on Art School Live. Thank you for tuning in. If you are new, we have a free gift for you, and that is a free video. You can get it streaming instantly, or you can get it online. Just go to 97artsecrets.com. We have gone through some of the hundreds of videos that we produced and picked some really great segments. It's free to you. If you want the DVD, you can pay the shipping, which is like $5 or something. But anyway, grab it. It's really terrific. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.